Embattled FTX former CEO was back in court today, only to be remanded again. Foreign Affairs Minister Fred Mitchell defending the country over the FTX debacle, a multi-million-dollar development underway for Long Island, and police will be more visible on the streets as we approach the holidays season. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lissy Bastian with your JCN Evening News for this Monday, December 19th. Thanks for joining us. Embattled former king of crypto Sam Bankman-Fried, who also goes by the initial SBF, headed back to the Bahamas Department of Corrections this afternoon after facing a magistrate at the Nassau Street Court complex this morning. The hearing was lamented as a waste of time by both the prosecutor and the magistrate after SBF's lawyer says he was shocked by his appearance in court today. Our Destiny Johnson was in the courtroom and has more on this story.
Sam Bankman-Fried SBF, who faced Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt less than a week ago and declined to waive his right to an extradition trial, was back in the magistrate's court on Monday morning with the intent to end his fight to being extradited to the United States. But just minutes after court began, it was adjourned for 45 minutes as SBF's lawyer, Jerome Roberts, noted that Magistrate Shaka Seville that he was surprised that SBF had appeared in court, as apparently he had no knowledge that he was scheduled to an appearance. He added that things were moving prematurely without his knowledge. He requested that a 45-minute adjournment to speak with SBF. Court reconvened at 11:30 a.m. with Magistrate Seville asking if SBF had intervened to appear in court today, to which Mr. Roberts said he could not speak to. Prosecutor and Deputy Director of Legal Affairs Franklin Williams asserted that Roberts' claims were unbelievable, as the announcement of the court hearing was widely reported in the press and there was an official summons and order of attendance. He continued that the day was a waste of time, as the purpose of the hearing had been diverted, to which Magistrate Seville agreed. Mr. Roberts, on the other hand, contends that he has no interaction with the media and that there is a possibility that SBF may wish to be extradited if they had the federal indictment that he claimed he never received. He says an affidavit was not enough to make a decision. Mr. Roberts requested additional time to speak with SBF's U.S. counsel within the precinct of the court for advisement of SBF's position on the matter. The magistrate allowed for the court to be cleared, and SBF was allowed to speak with U.S. counsel on speakerphone with authorities present. Magistrate Seville contends that Fried was not in a position to waive his right to extradition and was remanded back to B-Docks until he is required to return to court. He is scheduled to return to court on February 8, 2023. However, SBF has applied to the Supreme Court for bail. That hearing is scheduled for January 17th. Meanwhile, in the U.S., a federal indictment was unsealed following SBF's arrest here in the Bahamas. Those charges include fraud, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and violating campaign finance regulations. If found guilty, SBF faces 115 years in prison. For JCN News, I'm Destiny Johnson.
Foreign Affairs and Public Service Minister Fred Mitchell defending the country yet again as he gave more insight into the FTX debacle in an interview with international media recently. The minister contends that the collapse of FTX has had no impact on foreign relations. Our Caitlin Babb has more in this report.
The finger-pointing and the finger-wagging will not be useful in resolving the process of what needs to be done in regard to the collapse of FTX digital markets and the provision of compensation to those affected by the fallout. Minister of Foreign Affairs Fred Mitchell telling international media Bloomberg as much this past Friday in a telephone interview. Minister Mitchell reiterating with Jim Wiss the same sentiments he has with local media.
What is important is to know that I don't think Bahamians believe that the jurisdiction has anything to do with the misdeeds. The jurisdiction is, as far as we are concerned, well regulated, and we've done all the necessary checks that we think for a new business or any business coming into the Bahamas. The issue is is the person who's responsible for the alleged misdeed caught and punished, and will there be compensation for those people who are victims? At the end of the day, because there are competing legal jurisdictions, there's the United States federal and state jurisdictions, and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, its own jurisdiction. There'll be competing laws at this. It's important for the two jurisdictions or the three jurisdictions to get together and see how this can be resolved.
Now, FTX faced a financial crisis in early November, which led to the collapse of FTX cryptocurrency exchange. The Securities Commission of the Bahamas quickly jumped into action, freezing the assets of the company, and moved to put the company into liquidation, and secured joint provisional liquidators through the Bahamas' Supreme Court. Amidst the fallout, former CEO Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested, with the expectation of being extradited. However, according to Minister Mitchell, the current blowback has no impact on the relationship between the Bahamas and the United States.
This is not a government issue. The collapse of FTX is not a government issue. The government comes into the matter only at the point at which, if there is an alleged allegation of unlawful conduct in one state, or one country, and that country asks for the extradition of the person who is supposed to have done the misdeed, then the government comes into it. So you have a minister responsible for extradition, which is also the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the Bahamas. So that's a government-to-government issue. But the question of the faults, the crimes or alleged crimes, that has to do with the Securities Commission. The question on the civil side of whether a company goes into liquidation or whether there's a provisional liquidator or not, or into bankruptcy, those are matters for the courts. And the government doesn't interfere in the courts, and the government doesn't interfere in the Securities Commission's work.
When questioned on the ramifications of the investment with FTX and how the situation is reflecting on the Bahamian government, Minister Mitchell had this to say.
We have promoted ourselves as a jurisdiction that's friendly to investment. The American government promotes friendly to investment business laws and regulations. And so there's nothing which is unusual about what happened with this. A government licenses an entity, and an entity that's supposed to be making significant investments in a country, you welcome that entity. It happens in this case to have gone bad. And there are several other examples of these kinds of investments that have gone bad previously, both in our country and in the United States. But you try to promote business. So I'm sort of, I guess I'm arguing a minimalist position. I'm saying that I understand because of the scale of the numbers that you hear. The numbers are mind-boggling that you're hearing. But at the end of the day, this is a business failure, which is being dealt with on the civil side by the bankruptcy laws in the United States, the liquidation laws in the Bahamas, and the criminal laws of both jurisdictions. And that's how we are.
Minister Mitchell adding that bad characters exist everywhere, no matter the laws and jurisdictions put in place. He says his prediction is that eventually this will be seen as just another business failure and does not expect it to have lasting effects on the Bahamas' reputation. For JCN News, I'm Caitlin Babb.
A $250 million development in South Long Island underway following a signing of a heads of agreement with Azul Destinations and Calypso Cove Destinations for the multi-million-dollar development. Calypso Cove will include a cruise port terminal, marina, and a luxury residential resort in South Long Island. It features a 200-room hotel, mega yacht, marina facilities, interior pools, and lagoons. Prime Minister Philip Davis and other government officials was on Long Island for the signing. Teachers moving abroad for employment opportunities is not the main reason for the teacher deficit, according to Minister of Education and Technical and Vocational Training, Glenys Hannah Martin. Speaking on the sidelines with reporters just as the University of the Bahamas signed a Memorandum of Understanding agreement with Barry University, the Education Minister reiterated that though there may be a scarcity of teachers in some key areas such as English, Minister Hannah Martin does not doubt the commitment of the teachers in the country.
Well, I think that teachers are very committed and that they're not, and most are not seeking to leave the country. I think that's a myth, and that we do have some shortages, but it's in key areas, scarcity areas, in key subjects like English and mathematics, and we're working on that. So I think that I just want to, establish a foundation on that discussion. We hope that we will move from strength to strength. We have to make a special thrust for scarcity areas, so that we are able to ensure that in those key areas that we're able to facilitate. But you have scarcity areas in other areas in our life. We have them in, with engineers and etc. That's why your scholarship regime seeks to really promote and encourage students to study engineering. So scarcity in particular areas is not unusual, but we have to address it because these are key areas. And when we don't have teachers in those areas, it creates serious deficits that are not acceptable.
Now, as schools are officially closed for the Christmas holidays, when asked if there may be goals or an agenda already planned for her ministry in the coming new year, Minister Hannah Martin says this.
I want to see that we go into a real focused thrust in national development. In education, we want everything to come together so that we're able to really go on a fierce agenda to advance the interests of young people and children in this country. There's a lot of years of, how do I put it? I think there's a lot of redressing to happen. There's a lot of repair that needs to happen. A lot of resources are going to be necessary. So I'm hoping in the new year we get those resources. But we really want to see how education can be aligned.
To Minister Hannah Martin, all research shows was significant globally, and also to reveal any other long-standing learning issues afflicting Bahamian students, such as with literacy and numeracy, that may be addressed specifically. You're watching JCN News. When we return, police are investigating 2 traffic fatalities and cautioning the public on driving during the holiday season. Stay with us.